It's always a little funny to me when you see people complain about NBA players who get along after the game. You know what I'm talking about when you see two guys compete for 48 minutes and then they laugh and hug and make small talk after the buzzer. There are fans who get infuriated by this, who think you can't possibly be competitive enough if you're that friendly off the court. That doesn't ring true to me, and I think there's a pretty natural reason why. Most of us who do the job I do are highly competitive about it. We want to tell the best stories on a beat. We want to write things that make our competitors wish they had written them. And at the same time, when you cover a team, you often become pretty close with the other people who do it. You're around each other a lot, and not just at news conferences or on press row. Covering the NBA involves a lot of waiting in the media room for a game to start, waiting at a gate for a flight, and so much waiting for interviews at the end of practices. You spend all this time killing time around people whose backgrounds are at least a little similar to yours. You went to journalism school. You have an interest in sports. Friendships are inevitable, and in many cases, really close ones develop. But liking someone doesn't mean they don't infuriate you when they beat you at something, when they write a story you wish you had written. And few people I've shared a beat with have infuriated me more than Fred Katz, who routinely wrote terrific stories when he covered the Thunder at the Norman Transcript, and I was at the Oklahoma. Fred and I went on to work together at The Athletic, where he still works covering the New York Knicks. But he stayed very connected to the Thunder, and I never get tired of talking basketball with him. This week felt like perfect timing to bring him in for a chat about Tuesday's arena vote that secures the long-term future of the franchise in Oklahoma City, and to talk about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and just how legitimate his MVP candidacy is. Today, we're talking about that and more with Fred Katz of The Athletic. I'm Brett Dawson, and this is Heard Thundering. Before we get started, I want to thank the sponsors who support our show: MidFirst Bank, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, Fire Lake Casino, and your local Ford dealers. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full line of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. And so let's bring in Fred Katz, Fred, it's good to see you. We can see each other, and I feel like I talk to you every day. I really don't. I talk to you like every month, maybe. But because of the group thread that we're in, I do feel like we talk like daily, like hourly.
In a 2023 sense, we talk every day.
Yeah, correct.
We're on an extremely active group thread, which I don't know how many texts get sent to that thread every day.
I don't think I want to know, honestly. Like, I think the number would probably depress me.
At least on a bad day, on a slow day, like a really slow day, when and the names that I'm going to say who are on the thread are probably familiar to anybody who would listen to this podcast, but it's you, me, Royce Young, Andrew Schlecht, and John Hamm. And unfortunately, not the actor John Hamm. And
it's really
I would say on a slow day, there are 50 texts.
Yeah, that's
when we just have nothing to talk about.
Yeah. So, and lately it's been much more than that, because we've had an arena vote to talk about, which now I don't know what we're going to talk about now. We'll probably find something. We'll find something ridiculous and stupid to talk about. But that arena vote is out of the way. And I know, like, you're up in New York City, but because of the thread and because you've covered the Thunder, I know you're at least aware of what was happening. You're aware of the plan. And you're aware of sort of the bottom line of this, which is, one, the city's paying a whole lot of money for an arena, but two, this is going to trigger a lease that's going to keep the Thunder here for 25 years once the building is built. And so that's a long time. We're looking at more than 25 years. We're looking at beyond the year 2050, where the Thunder is in Oklahoma City, and that's significant.
Yeah, and it sounds like from what Mayor Holt was saying earlier that the arena the goal would be to get the arena up by 2029, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about 25 years from then is
right.
The way that I interpreted it, right? So, I mean, we're really talking way out into the future. Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, I really, really wanted Royce Young to be forced to move back to Seattle. I thought that would just be a fantastic saga and something I was really looking forward to following. But obviously, it passed by a good amount, right? And it's look, I lived in Oklahoma City for a few years, and I covered that team for a while. I still think I know that team really well. I know a lot of people with that team. I know a lot of people who live in that city. That is obviously a beloved team locally. I was not surprised by the final results of that at all.
Yeah. I think you were here in a pretty good time. You were here for one of the best Thunder teams, the last Kevin Durant team, and then here when, I've actually talked a lot about those Westbrook, Paul George teams lately, because I think that was when people, in a way, fell a little bit out of love with the team. That team was, I was writing about this week, looking at the numbers, just comparing this team, this particular team this year is 10-1 against teams with losing records. Those teams kind of had like one of those teams went 23-17 against sub 500 teams. They were a team that didn't necessarily, they're not a team about which you would have said, boy, those guys just bring it every night. They're really every single night. They're just bringing it to you. But you saw this at a really high time too. That team making the run to the 2016 conference finals. What the team means to the people here. And while you can argue a lot, and people have and will, about whether this is a good deal for the city financially, the city's paying a ton of money, at least $850 million. But I do think there is something not unique, but special about the way this place and that team connect.
I think that's definitely true. I also think what comes into it is people talk all the time about getting a new arena, and there are constant debates about how much that actually helps the surrounding area, how much business that brings to the surrounding area, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you put, for example, I lived in DC. I lived 4 blocks from Nats Park where the Nationals play. And the area that was around there was not nearly the same thing 15 years ago, 20 years ago, before the Nats started building that up. And that really did change the economics of the area around that ballpark. And now it's this completely different place. And it really did work. There are other instances, let's stay on DC, for example, where the Wizards play in downtown DC. And now apparently they're moving to Virginia because they can't get what they want in downtown DC. And that area has kind of deteriorated. And we see it not work all the time. I think what's interesting and more particular to Oklahoma City is that it's not just about the surrounding area around the arena. It's not just about Bricktown. It's not just about, there's an Omni now. It's the only pro team in the state. And having a pro team in the state does change people coming into the state. It does change people coming into the state for business. It does change hospitality and all of that. It's different than a place where there are 2 or 3 other professional teams and one of those teams leaving. It does change industry in a state. It does change the economics of not just the surrounding neighborhood, but also farther out than that. And I think that's a part of it too, in a way that it should be contextualized. That's a little bit different than some other arena votes. And generally, I'm very skeptical about public funding for arenas. I skew skeptical in that sense, especially when it means Royce Young having to move somewhere else, because I would just watch a reality series of Royce Young like eating ketchup from all different states and having to learn what it's like not to live in Oklahoma. But unfortunately, it sounds like Royce is going to be staying there.
Yeah, that's a real bummer for you. I don't know that we would have gotten that reality show, but I too would have watched it. And especially I can't think of a super weird place. Seattle, actually, I think Royce would fit right in Seattle. I think he'd do great. But if they moved to LA, that would really be something. I would watch. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the Youngs go to Vegas. The Youngs
go to Vegas. It would be fantastic. I don't think that show would have really high ratings, but I think it would be critically acclaimed.
Royce Vegas, I think we could call it. It's funny. I could bore people to death and have a little bit with talk about agglomeration, which is a concept I learned about from economists as I was writing about the arena deal, where, part of the reason that cities became cities is that, industry wanted to connect to each other, wanted to be closer to each other. And I had a city economist tell me that now the new agglomeration is that people want to live in places where there are amenities. And so, economists will tell you, this is a really bad deal for the city. It's bad for the people who pay sales tax. They're going to spend way more money on this arena than they'll ever sort of directly see back. And other economists will kind of push back and say, the thing is, that if you want people to come to your city and you want people to stay in your city, you need some of these amenities. And this Thunder vote was less about building a new arena. It's about building a new arena, believe me, for Clay Bennett and the Thunder. It's about getting a brand new building. For the city, it's really about keeping the team and keeping all the things that come with the team, because if they didn't build an arena, eventually these guys that bought this franchise for $625 million or whatever are going to sell it for $3.5 billion or whatever the number ends up being in that day and age, whenever that happens. And if you do that, if you get sold, there's no real reason to stay here. As people have said many, many times, it's a miracle that they have a team. And that's not a knock on the city that I have chosen now for the second time to live in. It's a fact of life that, that's the cost of doing business in the NBA. And you're in a market where, you can get a better deal from a Seattle or a Vegas or someplace like that if somebody wants to buy the team. And so this was a vote about keeping the team. The Thunder never made a direct threat. They kind of let the mayor do that for them, which is a good position to be in as a team. You never have to actually come out and say, hey, if this doesn't happen, we're going to leave. Somebody else does it for you. But I do think keeping the team is crucial to the continued development of the city. I know some people would push back against that and say, the money that gets spent on a team would get spent somewhere else. But the pro arena vote did a really good job of getting their message out. And one of the things, Fred, this might amaze you. This flat out amazed me. There are 20 downtown hotels in Oklahoma City. Do you know how many there were before the Thunder came here?
Oh man. So define downtown.
I don't
21
know.
Is 21C downtown?
Yes, that's downtown for sure. I think the question would be more like, is the hotel in Midtown, would that have counted? I don't know.
Like Ambassador, is the Ambassador downtown?
Right.
Okay, let's see. I think that courtyard has been there since before the land rush.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess the courtyard was there.
Yeah.
I'm also going to guess that Renaissance was there too. And I'm going to guess the Cole Court was there. And then maybe I'm going to say there were 4. I'm going to say there was 1 extra.
I don't have the data to say what the hotels were, but the number is 2. There were 2.
Oh, wow.
Before the Thunder. 2 downtown hotels.
Had to be that courtyard. That courtyard, that courtyard was constructed before the land was even settled. There was nothing. It was tumbleweeds and a courtyard. Somehow it was staying in business. No one was staying there. There weren't even people yet. There were just dinosaurs walking around being like, who built this courtyard 70 million years ago?
It's like
that courtyard had to be there. I bet you it was the
T-Rex
Cole Court.
couldn't get a Pepsi out of the little shop in the lobby because his arms were too short.
He was really struggling with the mini fridge. He kept bending over and he couldn't get his arm in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's that I have once been in that courtyard.
That's Desmond Bain's problem right now.
Is that where you stay now? Do you stay in the courtyard when you come back?
I never stay in the courtyard because it's too close to the arena. It is literally adjacent to the arena, and it's too close to the arena. And I'm just I need space, so I'll stay at the Sheraton that's right there, or maybe that Renaissance I've stayed in. Or the Ambassador I'll stay in if the price comes down a little bit, because the Ambassador is a really nice hotel. I've stayed in 21C too.
This is what the people come for.
Absolutely.
This is what they want to know, where people stay when they come to town. There's a new Fairfield or Spring Hill or something downtown now, right on the other side of the Omni. So maybe that's an option. I actually don't know if it's open yet.
Well, I'll be there in 2 weeks.
I know you're going to be here.
I've heard the National is a really nice hotel. I've heard that's really nice. That opened after I moved out of town. I've heard the National is really nice. The bar downstairs looks really nice.
Yeah.
A lot of new hotels. I believe that there were 2. I mean, if you've read Boomtown by Sam Anderson, who is an infuriatingly fantastic writer. As a writer, does it make you angry?
It's awful because he just parachutes in, he just comes in here from Portland, right? Is where he's from, and just writes. That book has more insight into the Thunder than just about anybody's written. just about anything that anybody's ever done. And he just like dropped in here and started to stay here and did that. And like during that process wrote, I recall, you probably do too, I was so mad about that Westbrook story he had in the New York Times Magazine that had so many great details. That calendar, remember that calendar detail of like, there was a calendar in somebody's office, maybe Matt Tumbleson's office, I can't remember. And Russ liked it. It was some kind, I forget what it even was, but he really liked it and he wanted it. And this is all in Sam's story. And they said, we can get you one. And he was like, no, I want this one. Give it to me and make another one for you, which I think they did.
Yeah, and there was the one with the kid tying his shoelaces that he noticed on the book bus.
Yeah.
Where he really honed in. It was amazing because Sam got like 7 minutes with Russ for that story. And I don't think Russ really told him much of anything. But his observational skills are unbelievable, being able to deduce kind of Russ's obsessive neatness and his obsessive organization and finding all of these ways to show it was amazing. Anyway, Sam wrote in Boomtown, which is really both about Oklahoma's state history and a lot about the Thunder. He writes in that book about the way that the town was kind of torn down. And I think it was the 60s and early 70s when oil was booming. And they had a plan to kind of build it up and kind of make it the Denver of the Southwest. And then when oil got bad and the money wasn't necessarily there, they kind of just had nothing going downtown. So, the Thunder coming there. And also, we should say, the Hornets coming there in 2005 for a little bit too, which really laid the groundwork to show the NBA, okay, you can actually have an NBA team here. Like this can work. I think if the Hornets hadn't come there after Katrina, I don't know if we ever see a team in Oklahoma City. I don't know if the Thunder ever exist. But I think that team being there really spurred so much about what's happening throughout the city. I mean, you say downtown, but throughout the city, that Oklahoma City has been built up way more. There's a much higher population of young people and young professionals right now than there was 15 years ago. Used to be very, very few young professionals in Oklahoma City. That's why you see this uprising of apartment complexes and places the young people live. It's definitely changed things. And I'm not smart enough to know how not having that team there once it's already been there, how that would affect things if positive momentum is going and it would just continue to go. But it's a question worth pondering on.
Do you remember, this is the next step for Oklahoma City. This is my next challenge to the city because they've got, this arena is coming. I think some stuff will spring up around it. I think there will be some kind of entertainment district like a lot of newer arenas have. And the real challenge now for Oklahoma City, like go downtown and just walk around. Just walk around downtown because you remember, I'm sure you remember, you and I had this little side interview with Alex Abrines after it was either an early practice or maybe even the blue-white scrimmage they used to do. And we were just talking, it was like he was brand new to the city. He had just gotten there. And we were asking him about, just his impressions of living there. And the thing he said was, there's never anybody on the street. Like, I just walk around downtown and the sidewalks are totally empty.
Alex Abrines did not like Oklahoma City.
He did not.
He was... I liked Oklahoma City. I loved my time there. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Alex Abrines is from Mallorca, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And had
very
played
different. Big culture
I don't remember
shock.
if he played in Argentina. He played in a big city as well.
Right. He was not thrilled. He was not thrilled.
No.
And yes, I mean that was definitely a that's a thing that a lot of people mentioned. And I being a New Yorker had a similar sort of experience where it's like not a lot of people walking around.
Yeah.
So
and
now
I too, to be clear, I love it here. I've chosen to live here again. I really like living here. I have a lot of really good friends here. But like Eric Horn once wrote a story about how Carmelo Anthony would just walk around the street. That's like what he would do at night when he was bored. He would just go walk around, and he could do that because like there weren't people out there to like swarm him, because there's like nobody walks around downtown. So just walk around downtown. That's all I'm asking for Oklahoma Cityans. It's like, let's all walk around downtown. I do it all the time. I love to go downtown and just walk.
I mean, I would do it all the time too. I lived in Midtown when I lived there.
It's like, yeah, me too. I lived in
And
Midtown
I would walk. I would just walk downtown because I love going for walks. I love being in a walking city. I love getting like my 15,000 steps every day.
Yeah.
That is literally what I do. Like I shoot for 15,000 every day, and I just go for walks. I listen to podcasts. I listen to music. I make my phone calls, whatever. And I would walk. I would walk downtown. I would walk by Kitchen 324, go down into Bricktown, circle around Mantles and come back up. And I'd have my nice walk. And it's normally nice weather too. At least it's walkable weather, especially in the winter. I mean, the summer it's so hot, but
that's my challenge to you, Oklahoma City. Go walk around. Go walk downtown. We mentioned, you mentioned the Hornets, and I think I've said this before that I think Chris Paul, if you start talking about the list of the most important basketball players in the history of Oklahoma City, I mean, KD and Russ are ahead of the pack, and I think there would be some argument for Nick Collison. Chris Paul is on that list just because of not only the initial run with the Hornets, but then coming back and kind of bridging the gap between these two teams. And this is all just a transition to talk about the guy who's ultimately going to be on that list. I don't know where he is right now, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will eventually be one of those people who we'll talk about as one of the most important players in the history of the franchise, assuming that, he doesn't wake up and demand a trade tomorrow, which I don't think is going to happen. We're going to be talking about him a lot we're going to frame him in that way. And what he means to the franchise long term. I think if you set, I was talking to somebody about this the other day who works with the team, and I was saying, if you set an over under on the number of players on this team who will have this new arena as their home arena, the smart money is on a line like 2.5 probably, because like players just don't stay for 6 years, and so who knows if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will be here when that arena opens. But he is a guy who means a whole lot to the franchise right now and is going to moving forward. And Fred, I wanted to talk a little bit about, you were on the Low Post last week talking about midseason awards candidates. A lot of people did that quarter season awards candidates, because we got to the 25% mark roughly of the schedule last week. And I want to talk about Shai, and I want to talk about MVP a little bit. I don't think he's first right now. I don't think any kind of straw poll would put him first. But the more he plays, the more they win, and the more his numbers do the things that they're doing. You can't have a legitimate conversation, I don't think, about the award without talking about him.
Definitely not. I mean, he's 100% in the conversation to be on the ballot. No question. I mean, you mentioned I went on with Zach Lowe last week, and when I was prepping for that podcast, I'm going through MVP candidates. By the way, Kenrich Williams is 100% going to be on the Thunder in 2029. But as I'm
probably
just going to be playing, 22 minutes a game and taking the charge, once a half, and it'll be exactly the same. He's still going to be there. He's actually going to be the mayor at that point. He's going to defeat Holt at some point. He's going to be
player mayor. Yeah.
Player mayor. Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah, it'll from player to mayor. I mean, that is the perfect headline.
It's going to be a great book by Royce Young. From player to mayor.
Royce is going to write it from his new home in Vegas. It's going to be beautiful.
Vegas.
Exactly. So I'm prepping for Zach's pod, and part of the reason that MVP is so difficult this year is because we're only 20 games in. And normally, as you go through the season, there's just some amount of attrition. Someone goes through a really long slump that kind of takes them out of it. Someone's team craters, which takes another guy out of it. Somebody gets hurt, and that takes that guy out of it. But as of now, I listed 9 guys who I was like, if you put any of these 9 on your MVP ballot today, and Shai was one of them, if you put any of these guys on your MVP ballot today, I'm like, of course. It's not even like, yeah, okay, I'll give it to you. It's like, I feel terrible leaving 4 of those people off of my ballot. And when I did my ballots with Zach, I actually did not have Shai in my top 5. And going into it, I thought I was going to. I felt awful not having Shai on there. He could easily climb back in there. He's having an unbelievable season. The efficiency numbers are incredible for somebody averaging 30 a game. And obviously he's one of the main forces carrying one of the best teams in the league, which helps a ton. It's just a really difficult race with Jokic having an incredible season, although he has certainly cooled off these last couple of weeks. His efficiency has been very un-Jokic-like the last couple of weeks, and he hasn't had Jamal Murray, but he's Nikola Jokic, so he's going to be in there. Kevin Durant is having an obscene season. You need to play 65 games this year in order to just be eligible. You're not allowed to be on the ballot if you play fewer than 65 games. It's a new rule this year. We'll see if KD gets to 65. That's obviously always in question these days. But right now, he's played enough, and the dude's playing out of his mind, shooting like 50% from three. Embiid is having another incredible season and has really improved as a passer. Giannis is looking like Giannis. LeBron has been obscene.
It's
obscene.
Impossible. It's impossible that he's this good. It's not. Like, I'm not sure I believe it. Like, I'm not sure that this is the same person. Like, there's a cloning thing, or I don't know.
It is insane. I mean, one of the things, it's just totally and completely insane. One of the things that we talked about with LeBron at the end of last year was like, he looks like he lost a step a little bit. He looks like he doesn't have quite as much lift come playoff time in this conference finals. He's not really finishing around the rim the same way. And I remember a couple of years ago when LeBron was in the MVP conversation before he got hurt. And a lot of people thought he was leading the MVP conversation at different points. And a lot of the conversation around LeBron being in the MVP conversation that year was, my goodness, he's 37 and look at what he's doing. The fact that he's doing this at 37 is amazing. And I don't disagree with that sentiment at all. But you don't get graded on a curve for your age for MVP. So I always hated that. I was like, well, then why don't we just give the MVP to Udonis Haslem? Because the fact that this dude is still in the league and hasn't played in 8 years and is 57 years old and his grandkids are going off to college and he was actually around when that courtyard in downtown Oklahoma City was built.
He's the first guest.
That's remarkable.
Hey, he's got Marriott points from the first night.
You want to talk about hotels in Oklahoma City? Udonis Haslem has not just the greatest quote about hotels in Oklahoma City ever. He might have the greatest quote in NBA history. And it just happens to be about the Skirvin in downtown OKC. Oh, I bet you the Skirvin was around.
That's got to be one. I asked somebody yesterday. That's got to be one of the two, right? And I think that it was. Yeah,
it's got to be the Skirvin. I bet you it's the Skirvin and the Colcord.
Because those ghosts were alive at some point. You know, like they were living people, and they surely they predate the Thunder.
Right. Could that hotel's been around for a very long time. That's a very good point. But so back to LeBron. The season that LeBron is having.
Well, I did want to say, what was the quote that Udonis Haslem had?
Yeah, sorry. I have the worst ADHD of all time.
Yeah.
I would find the quote, but the Miami Herald right now has a paywall, and I don't subscribe to the Miami Herald. They didn't used to. The quote was a story about the Skirvin being a haunted hotel and a lot of Heat players being afraid to stay there. And some funny quotes from Heat players. And the story ends, it was Manny Navarro. The story ends with Navarro saying, but there's one Heat player who does not care. And you think that it's going to be because Haslem is like, no, it's ridiculous that people think that there are actual ghosts here. But instead what he says is, I ain't scared of no ghost. A ghost will have a hell of a time if he sees me. And then just goes on to talk about how he'll beat the crap out of a ghost if it comes into his room. And it is just wonderful. If you want to pay for the subscription to the Miami Herald, it's honestly worth it for just that quote.
That's back to DeMarcus Cousins once told me that his washcloth would move around the room. Like he would put it in the sink and then he would wake up and it would be on the towel rack or vice versa or whatever. Like that he was convinced that ghosts were moving his washcloth.
Someone was pulling a hilarious prank on DeMarcus Cousins.
It's probably true. That's probably true. Or like it's like that joke where the video on Instagram where the husband tells his wife, just put your pizza boxes on this coffee table and tomorrow it'll all be gone. Or you just throw your laundry on the counter and tomorrow it magically gets folded. It's probably like housekeeping came in and did that, and he was thinking that it wasn't. But to your point about LeBron, I agree with you about the age.
This is
curve.
not age slanted anymore. This is just. This is just the fact that this dude is shooting 62% on twos, which is a career high, and 41% on threes, which is tied for a career high. And he's averaging 25, 8 and 7. I actually think his defense has been better than it was last year. It's been pretty good. The Lakers are like 21 points per 100 possessions better when he's on the floor. The MVP race is obscene. You still have Jason Tatum averaging an efficient 30. You have Luka having arguably the best season of his career, certainly right up there, 31, 8 and 8 on fantastic shooting. Like it is, and then Tyrese Halliburton. It is unbelievably difficult. And man, it's going to have to whittle down some way. But let's talk about your guy. Let's talk about Shai, because he certainly could be in that top 5.
And by the way, there's a couple guys there. Like you could get through a really good long list, and like I'm not saying De'Aaron Fox should be on anybody's list of 5, but like De'Aaron Fox is awesome. He's having a great year. Like there's a million guys. I think Andrew Schlecht said to me the other day, I think on our podcast, and if not, I'll just out him and say that he said it privately, that if the Thunder were to win at this rate for the rest of the season, if they kept maintain this winning percentage, he thinks Shai would win it. I don't think that's necessarily true just because of what you just said. There's so many really strong candidates. But if he is on one of the best teams in the league, and if he's having the efficiency that he's having, if that maintains, which is going to be hard to do, the level he's at right now is going to be super hard to maintain over the course of however many games he ends up playing. But if he does all that, plus I think, we talk about you don't give LeBron the advantage for having, being older. You don't grade on a curve. You wouldn't give Kenrich Williams the 2030 MVP just because he's also mayor. Like that's not going to be a reason that that your vote goes that way. But like I do think that defense is a thing. Defense, you're like he's got to go to city council meetings and he's out here guarding Bronny James Jr. Like he's. But I think you would look at. I think there are things that people use as kind of tiebreakers, and the leap he's made defensively, I think, is really significant. I think it's a thing people will talk about more. It's a thing we're certainly talking about here. I think you'll see it written and talked about quite a bit from coming out of here, and it'll become a little bit more of a national story. His steals are crazy. It's ridiculous. I think he's got 10 games this year with 3 steals, and I can't remember the number with 5. But he's also just a more complete defender. He's worked on it quite a lot. Mark Daignault said because they have Lou Dort, if you put Shai on the best perimeter defender and you let Lou Dort kind of roam and do some of the things Shai is doing, they could both do those things, but neither one would be as good as the other. So I think, Shai is a much better on-ball guy than he used to be, but he doesn't have to be this elite on-ball guy. And so it does allow him he gets steals in all kinds of different ways. The other night, he's playing post defense on Andrew Wiggins and he jumps a post entry. And I just don't think that's a play he makes 2 years ago. He's studied a lot. He's a lot smarter defensive player. He picks his spots a lot more. He's like a magnet for the ball. Sometimes some of the steals are like, how in the world did he, how did that end up in his hands? But I do think he's becoming, I don't know that he's got a chance to make an all defense team. It's just that the field there is so crowded. But among the MVP candidates,
also it's positionless now too.
Right.
Which is going to make things a lot harder for guards.
That's true. Yeah. Cause you're going to be able to say like so many of these big guys can make it, you're going to be able to, you don't have to make a choice between Anthony Davis and Rudy Gobert and Anthony Davis probably aren't in the same plane this year, but like whatever the case might be, if you're making that last spot decision, you don't have to choose between 2 big guys. Right. But he's had a great year in that regard. And then like that's on top of the offense stuff. And among the guys who are the elite MVP candidates, he's become among the better defenders, which I think is a real step for him. And like, I think will be meaningful when people vote.
I think that's totally true. And I'll add to your point about steals. And he leads the league in steals by like, last I checked a couple days ago, he had led the league in steals by like almost a full steal.
Yeah.
Because he's averaging right around 2.9, 2.8, something like that. But what I think has been really good about his defense, and Thunder fans are familiar with the other side of this, which is a point guard who gets a lot of steals, but who can do it to the detriment of his own team.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm talking about Earl Watson. And he doesn't really gamble. And the ability to get steals without gambling, without jumping into a passing lane, missing, and then giving up an open lane to the basket for somebody to cut or drive to or anything like that, or leaving your team in bad rebounding position or anything like that, putting your team into rotation. That's extremely detrimental. And if you do that all the time, then it's not worth getting 2 steals a game. It's just not, because you're hurting your team on way more than 2 possessions a game, and it doesn't even out. What he's done really well this year is he's picked his spots really well. I also don't discount the fact, and I don't know, you'd have to tell me if people have asked, Mark this, or if people have asked Shai or Chet. He was playing with the worst rim protection in the NBA pretty easily for a long time. And when that's the case, you have to be more solid defensively. You talk about him jumping into an entry pass lane with Andrew Wiggins there. You can't do that if you don't have somebody to protect the rim behind you. They are going to score.
If you miss that steal and he can just turn and score, and it's a given score.
Right. Like big Jalen Williams was their greatest line of defense in like years. And it was just because he took charges, like if Isaiah Roby is back there, you have to be solid. You can't take that chance, because if Mike Muscala is there, they're going to have a very good chance at getting a really easy layup. And that makes things even worse. But Chet is really good off the bat. And when he has Chet out there, it probably makes him feel a lot more confident to be able to pick those spots, because it's not as big of a risk. If he does mess up, now you got somebody going into Chet, who's a legitimately good rim protector off the bat, a good team defender. He's a lot stronger than I think a lot of people thought he was going to be. He doesn't get muscled on drives to the rim in the way that a lot of people thought he was going to be. Like, he's not a good defender for a rookie. And he's not just some high volume shot blocker who leaves his team in bad positions. Like, he is a good defender right off the bat and a legitimate rim protector and the best defensive center that they've had since Steven Adams. And that is a big difference for how the guys on the perimeter can operate.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Look, if Shai has a legitimate MVP candidacy, if he's on ballots, if he's top 5, top 4, top 3, whatever, Chet will be a huge piece of it, because that part is definitely true, that he's changed he's changed a lot defensively, including some stuff for Shai. But then offensively, he's unlocked their team and allowed Shai, I think, to do some things that, I was talking to Mark Daignault about this yesterday. Shai did a thing for a while where, like, every time he went away, he just came back as almost this completely, like, he would take these huge leaps as a player. He did it between his rookie year with the Clippers and his first year in OKC. He did it in the COVID break where he put on a lot of weight, came back a much stronger guy. He did it the season after that when he became a really high-level scorer. He did it again kind of before last season where he made this jump to all NBA-type player. And you reach a point in your career, he's 25 now, there's a lot of room to grow, but the big leaps are almost over. It's hard to make those continually. You just can't, like, if he made another leap like the one he made 2 years ago, he'd be one of the best players in the history of the game, and I'm not sure that that's his ceiling. Maybe it is. He wants to be. But he's doing some small stuff now at both ends, and offensively, one of the things is he's making quicker reads and quicker decisions and getting off the ball a little faster in different situations. And part of the reason you can do that is that the floor is spaced so differently because of Chet. It creates a lob threat. You talk about rim protection. They also had 0 lob threats. They had like 6 or 8 lob dunks last year. And so Chet creates this vertical space that he hasn't played with. Chet has opened, as great as he is, and this is on Shai and his work ethic and how much he gets better. But Chet has really changed the game for him. It's changed the floor for him a lot.
No question. And you look through the Thunder's most successful lineups, and there's a common string there. It's Shai with an extra shooter. Giddey is not a spacer. Dort is not a spacer. But it's Shai with an extra shooter. And when there's an extra shooter there, all of a sudden, they go to full throttle. Like their starting lineup is not flawless. It's really talented. And I think it's better than the numbers show right now. But their starters are getting outscored. And it's because the offense is not good enough.
Yeah.
Once a shooter enters the mix for either Giddey or Dort, they go through the roof.
The Isaiah Joe numbers are insane. Some of the lineups with Isaiah Joe, it's crazy.
The Isaiah Joe numbers are always insane. Yeah. He's been the plus minus king for like 3 years. And finally he's getting some love. I was so angry with myself because I went on Low Post and we talked 6-man. I had Isaiah Joe on my list. I was ready to say Isaiah Joe, and I literally just skipped over him when I was reading it off, and I forgot to mention Isaiah Joe. And I was so angry because I felt like Isaiah Joe was like such a good one. That's been awesome.
Niche. That's a good, you're really watching basketball if you're bringing up Isaiah Joe as a 6th man of the year candidate.
He's been awesome, and the on-offs for him are amazing. And by the way, the on-offs are a great argument for Shai for MVP. The Thunder are like 17 points per 100 possessions better when he's on the floor, according to Clean the Glass. And it's coming on both sides. Their offense is like 9 or 10 points per 100 better when he's on the floor. And their defense is like 7 points per 100 better when he's on the floor. It's really coming on both sides. He has a great argument to be on that ballot. I think it's hard to put him first right now, but quite honestly, it's hard to put anybody first. Jokic is kind of struggling. Embiid has been fantastic this year. His passing is way better, but his efficiency is actually down. Giannis is maybe it's just Giannis. I mean, maybe Tatum is, the guy with the best player on the best team in the East, but they're not even the best team in the league right now because it's technically Minnesota. I just don't think he's having as good of a season as the other guys. It is really difficult. Halliburton's not as good defensively as Shai, and offensively they're kind of different sorts of players. I probably put them about even in terms of their offense and how they get their offense, even though they operate differently. It's just really tough. It is really, really tough. But someone's going to separate himself because someone always does. And there will be attrition.
And you're right. That's part of what's going to happen is part of what one of these guys is going to do is just continue to play this way as other guys fall off for any number of reasons. And the injury thing is going to be one of them. We don't know which one of these guys is going to get hurt, but the odds that you have a 9-man list, the odds that none of those guys misses 10 games with an injury is pretty slim. I mean, that's just that's the NBA.
There's also these are incredible players. Someone's going to have a month where he averages 40, remember James Harden in 2018?
Yeah.
Where it was is Harden finally going to win? Is he going to do it? He's having another great year. And then come January, he literally averaged 40 for the entire month. Yeah. And he scored 40 points in a million consecutive games. I think it was a million. A million consecutive games. And at that point, everyone was like, okay, it's totally Harden now. Dude's averaging 36.
You think about Russ, and that's the other thing that's going to that can happen here. Russ was averaging a triple-double the whole season, and yet all those straw polls, he was never leading. It was always Harden. And then the last few weeks of the season, he just went ballistic in crunch time. He just had these crazy games where he just kept winning the game, and he has the moment in Denver, and that's the game where he breaks the triple-double record, and he makes a three-pointer that knocks the Nuggets out of the playoffs and secures the Thunder's playoff spot. that stretch of games is really what won it for him. I remember after that Denver game, all the players in the league being on Twitter saying, just give it to him now. Like he's the guy. And like, that's also sets up, there's also the possibility that happens for one of these guys, that they're in a playoff hunt. They're trying to get into position for seeding. And one of those guys just becomes the guy who has 3 or 4 of those MVP moments. And that changes the voters' minds.
My all-time favorite Russ stat, it's from that season. So clutch time is defined as a game that's within 5 points with 5 or fewer minutes to go. Do you know how many points per 36 minutes Russell Westbrook averaged during clutch time that season? That was his MVP season.
I used to know this. I can't remember the number. It was like, was it in the 40s?
Give me a guess. Give me a real guess.
44. It was something crazy, I think. You
think 44 would be crazy? 44 points per 36 minutes?
Sure. What is it?
It's not even close to that. He averaged 60 points per 36 minutes. And I'm not rounding, by the way. He didn't average 60.2. He didn't average 59.7. He averaged 60.0 points per 36 minutes during clutch time that season. It is by far the all-time record. It's not even close. It's by far the all-time record amongst like people who actually played in clutch time. And by the way, his efficiency numbers in clutch time were higher than they were the rest of the game. It's not because he was just shooting even though he was shooting every time. It's not just because he was shooting every time. His effective field goal percentage and his true shooting percentage were higher in clutch time that year than they were not in clutch time. That to me was why I felt like Russ was the MVP that year, because putting up numbers like that when your team needs it the most on a 47-win team, like you look at that team's net rating and the net rating says they should have won like 42 games, not 47.
Yeah.
And it's because Russ just did the crap that he did like in Denver. And that Denver game in April that season was one of the most incredible individual performances I've ever seen live, maybe number one. And it was 60 points per 36 minutes is hilarious. It's hilarious that you were like something crazy and incomprehensible, like 44. And I was like, no, you're off by like Reggie Miller's career average.
That reminds me of the year that that year when we did our preseason podcast, Eric Horner and I, we were supposed to make a bold prediction, like make a crazy prediction for the year. And I said, I think my prediction was that Russ would get 25 triple doubles. And Eric was like, that's absurd. That's too high.
He had 18 the year before. And people were saying, oh, could he average a triple? There was some talk leading into that year.
I read a story about it. I called Oscar Robertson and asked him, and I know what I'll never forget. Oscar Robertson was like, I can't believe nobody's done it yet. Of course he can. It's, like Oscar Robertson was like, it's so easy. Why don't they just do it?
It's such a funny parallel. Oscar Robertson and Russ, and we've both spoken to Oscar multiple times. Like and I like dealing with Oscar. He always gives me time. Always.
Very blunt.
He's so blunt. But he what I was going to say is that he and Russ, from a personality standpoint, kind of remind me of each other.
Like I could see that.
I totally see how similar they are. They're both like very blunt, very intense. They're just very similar personality types. I always thought it was funny. And I think that contributes because Oscar loves Russ. He loves Russ. I could also see Russ, when he's Oscar's age, kind of being a get off my lawn guy. And Oscar Robertson is totally a get off my lawn guy. And
100%.
Yes. And I could see Russ easily turning into a get off my lawn guy when he's like in his elder years. But Oscar loves Russ. Like he talks about him like he's his favorite player. I can't remember if he's explicitly said that he's his favorite, but he loves Russ because Russ is old school. He's old school intense.
Yep.
And Oscar loves
he kind of brought Oscar. He also kind of brought Oscar back into the forefront for a year, which I know Oscar liked. and appreciated. Like that was a thing that meant something to
Oh,
him.
for sure. Well, I've had on the record conversations with Oscar about how he feels like players today don't really know where things come from, and how he doesn't think he gets enough credit for his lawsuit in the 70s that kind of was the precursor to the precursor of free agency and all of that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think he definitely appreciates it when a big time player is appreciative and respectful and kind of as open to bringing him into the forefront as Russ was with him throughout that whole saga.
Yeah, Fred, it's kind of a weird note to end on, but we're out of time. We're gonna have to do this again because I can just talk basketball and hotels and weird numbers and all that kind of stuff with you forever. But we got to wrap up today. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being here. We're going to have to, we'll meet up again. Maybe we'll do a podcast together here or somewhere else when you're in town coming up soon. And maybe we'll hit up Republic and maybe we'll, I don't know, I'll come see you not at the Courtyard. But we definitely appreciate your time. Thanks for being here. If you like what you heard, please give us a like, give us a subscribe, follow us on YouTube, at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next week. We'll talk to you then.